Welcome everyone to Grim After Dark. This is the Frontline Gaming Network's weekly interview show where we hit the high points of the last week in the Frontline Gaming Network community and talk to the best players and content creators from around the world about the one thing we all love, Warhammer. Tonight we're going to be joined by Florida Man 40K host Tim Pinney, and we're going to share the best things we found online this week. As always, my co-host needs no introductions. He's an RTT machine. Competitive chuckler, and he's one tournament away from finally dropping AdMac forever. It's Danny McDivett. That was a solid 2-1 chuckle, Danny. I gotta say, like after that build up right there.
Yeah, John.
Danny, big week in the Warhammer community. Games Workshop released what they're calling, or what a lot of people are calling, an underwhelming roadmap of what's coming up. What's your take on the next few months of 40K?
Well, I feel like we kind of knew what was coming out already a bit with Orcs. I mean, we all assumed Orcs is coming out pretty soon. Although it sounds like maybe it'll be out a little bit sooner. I don't know.
September. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, because I was thinking it was going to be another October, but I was pleasantly surprised to be wrong. So,
well, we could see that pre-order be like September 25th.
Yeah, that's
and then all of the models and everything are going to be in October for branding purposes.
Right. And then the mystery codexes later this year, I was a little bit bummed about. It would have been nice to get kind of an idea of what they're going to be. However, I'm pretty excited that we might get to see some, maybe an Octarius supplement.
Yeah.
We'll see about that. We got a nice preview about that today.
Yeah.
Which was not part of the roadmap. So I'm not sure when that book is coming out, but I don't know. I think everybody's pretty excited, especially Tyranid players.
Yes. And that new Synapse rule coming up, or Synapse, I know there's going to be like 3 people who yell at me for that, where you got to be like within 12, so you can like cover the entire table. That's like a great rule that really fits in well with the army. Super excited to see how that goes from there.
Yeah, for sure.
And then what else we got coming up in the next few months, Danny?
Oh, man. So, John, I'll tell you what. I was very pleasantly surprised this week. I opened up, or maybe it was last week. I think it was last week. I opened up my email. I got an email from Frankie. I thought it was going to be another cease and desist. Like, please stop following my Twitter and posting all that shit about me. But it wasn't. It was.
I got one of those.
Yeah, well, you can't be surprised about that after all those pictures you sent him.
That's fair. I Aaron Dembski bowed him hard.
Oh, no. Oh, I thought they were just backside picks, but frontside picks. Come on, man. No, but I got a reminder that I had delayed my SoCal ticket for the next year. So I got a notice saying, hey, you got a ticket to the SoCal Open this year in 2021 at the end of October. So I was pleasantly surprised by that, and I can't wait for Reese to fulfill his promise to me that I can play 40K in the ocean wearing my aqua socks.
I think really he just told you to get out of his building and go to the ocean.
Well, it wasn't that time. It was a different time before that he told me to leave.
Good.
Yeah. So nobody had to call the cops that time.
That's fair. And then fulfilling our contractual obligations from the Frontline Gaming Network style guide of promoting a Frontline Gaming Network event once every 58.5 minutes. The SoCal Open registration is open now. So if you want to play 40K and see Danny in his special swim socks, which I forgot the name of in the last 30 seconds, is going to be October 22nd through the 24th at the Del Mar Fairgrounds in California. And it's going to
2 socks I'm wearing, John. So you can guess where one of them's going.
I mean, I'm hoping your feet. Because, I mean, I know you set that up to be a root thing, but I can guess that one of them's going on your feet. Socks are will to do.
It's true.
But yeah, very excited for that. It's going to be like a great event there. Danny, apparently, while Falcon appeared in the chat, good old Duke, you got way hotter after Charity Hammer. So
I was always this hot. I just had to teen movie myself back up to full hotness after Charity Hammer.
You took off your glass. Well, usually they take off your glasses. Yeah.
Ready to go.
Whew, now we can take you to prom. Well, with all of the talk of roadmaps, I did reach out to Papa or anything else you wanted to add there, Danny, about the SoCal Open this October. Frontline Gaming's next giant event coming to the Southern California.
Well, I'm pretty excited about the event. I think it's going to be the premier event of the season until LVO. But yeah, anybody who can attend should attend.
Yes, absolutely. But that got me thinking kind of the roadmap idea. And I was like, that's a pretty good thing. So I actually emailed Frontline Gaming Network creative director Val to see if Frontline has a roadmap for the future. And after I kind of got past the initial email where he thanked me for my interest in the Frontline Gaming Network and let me know that he wasn't looking for content creators at this point of time, he did actually let me know that Frontline Gaming Network does have a roadmap for like the next 3 months. So we could have our producer pull up the roadmap for FLGN. Beautiful. So here is the wonderful FLGN 2021 roadmap. As you can tell, September, all of the great shows on there. You have 40K Game Changers, you've got Chapter Tactics, Signals, a Thursday show, Grim After Dark, Stats Center, October. All of the same shows. We're a little bit smaller. That's okay. Tighter. The comedy works better in tighter, smaller sets. And then hopefully by November we'll have been replaced entirely by Stat Center, or at least the very hope of it.
Or someone with talent. One of those two things. Yeah.
Gosh, I really hope so at this point.
Me too.
Yeah. But yeah, so that is your roadmap for the next 3 months of the Frontline Gaming Network. I hope you're as excited as I am at the sheer 30 minutes of effort that went into making that wonderful thing. So thank you, whatever wonderful person behind a desk made that this afternoon. That wasn't the only thing we saw as well this week. As part of GW's roadmap, Black Templars, which many have called the worst Space Marine chapter of all time.
I've heard that said before, John, for sure, from numerous different people.
Yeah. And then described as a hot topic Space Marines, which just seems rude, and just the worst possible units. They're getting a new codex too, as our year of power armor continues, with an amazing piece of codex art in the front.
Stunning.
What we have here is the result of a Mechanicus experiment to combine a human with a giraffe. As we see here, this was actually found on Reddit, and was pointed out by Karmic Burner, to give credit where credit's due here. The proportions are a little bit off. We're seeing either the first appearance of Inspector Gadget in the 40K universe, or maybe slightly off proportions. Danny, what do you think the stat line for a Giraffe Marine is going to be?
Pretty solid. He's definitely can engage in melee from 2 inches away instead of just the normal 1 inch.
He's just going to pack away.
Yeah, totally. The really more problematic about them is hiding them in a true line of sight environment. So if you don't have exterior terrain, you're going to have a hard time keeping that head on that neck.
And now we finally, from this piece of art, have the question answered: why don't Primaris fit in regular transports?
Well, that's why they have to use the impulsor, John, because it has an open top on the back.
And because of the neck, and it just they kind of wave along. If it blows too hard, then it just like grass in the wind. That would be your Black Templar assault. But again, I'm going to point this out a lot in the next few months here. Black Templars, you are literally the worst army available in 40K. Barnard, I know some people in chat say Dark Angels are worse. At least you have a good joke to fall back on with the Chaos thing. But yeah, Black Templars, you're the worst. And I look forward to finding weekly memes to reprove this point until someone can tell me differently. And then, yeah, Duke lets us know in the chat, giraffe kicks can decapitate a lion. And he's terrified by this. And I would be terrified that he's in a situation where he can see both a giraffe and a lion at the same time.
Look, lions have famously weak necks, so I'm not really surprised that a giraffe could decapitate a lion. Anything could wow.
That's why they have. That's why they have the mane, is to hide the weakness of the neck. The same way I have a beard to pretend that I have a chin.
Oh no, John! Don't tell everyone. That's my secret too.
Speaking of that, I'm going to throw this little curveball into the show notes. Danny, they recently offered
Oh, no.
$2,000 to go to help children with cancer have a better time. And kind of like be like the through Child's Play, like the Charity Hammer charity, to shave your head and beard to make you look like some kind of Warhammer Jeff Bezos. You did turn this down.
I think I'd
What
look
was the
more like
thinking
a
behind
Warhammer Kingpin, John, to be fair. Like,
it?
if I shaved my head and my beard, that was something I have not spoken about it with my wife yet. So we'll see. I'm not totally discounting it, but I'll talk about it. That's a lot of money, and man, those kids need some PlayStations.
I find the best way to do something like this with a significant other is just to not talk about it and just show up having already made the decision. That way, they can't say no. The trust and faith in your marriage is strong.
I thought it was maybe because the divorce was finalized like on the spot.
Well, at that point, you got to worry about why those papers are in the pocket the whole time anyway. She's been taking lessons from my wife. It's fine.
Well, because of things like this, John, if you keep doing this all the time.
Totally fair. So GW, moving on past this here, GW hosted its first Open last weekend in beautiful and scenic Orlando, Florida. Not only did the pairing structure make it so I don't have to make a submarine joke or hear a single reference about that over the weekend, which just thank you so much for that. It was the whole event was streamed live over Warhammer TV on Twitch to mostly really positive reviews. And I think we have one of the comments on that available right here. Yeah. So again, very positive reaction from Com40K. We can obviously ignore the slightly conceited self-congratulations from a certain servo skull avatared man, but the coverage was amazing. Danny, what did you think of the stream coverage?
I thought it was great. I was excited. The hosts were informative, maybe too informative, some would say, but other than that, I think that they did a great job of explaining the game to someone who was new, as well as offering some high-level tactical advice.
Yeah, I got to say the combo of Paul Murphy and Nick Nanavati was not something that I looked at and was like, huh, that's a really good pairing. But man, was it a really good pairing. Like they both worked on each other really well and kind of came across with some like really great insight throughout.
Yep, for sure.
As I break people in my ear through that comment. Not saying that the fellow network host Paul Murphy or Nick Nanavati are bad or terrible. They're both great commentators, but the combo together, super strong.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are just going to let me die on that sword, aren't you?
Yep.
Perfect. All right. Something else we saw that was super cool. There was a lot of interactivity through the GW stream, so they were able to highlight what objectives need to be taken, movements that were taken, kind of where units had to go, and there was a really great visual overlay for the whole time. Danny,
it was good. I don't know what else you wanted me to say, man. It was high tech. There was some great drawings on the screen. I like the objectives. I was a little miffed that we didn't get to see some Nick Nanavati faces on the table, but I understand why.
Right. There's only so much you can put on the screen at one time before. We learned a lot today about kind of background noise and things, just making the bandwidth go crazy. So it's important to black up your objectives and just flip them over for that.
Yeah, John, that's actually why we use these televisions on our set, is we have to contain the amount of quality that we have into a smaller space.
Yeah, a more compact thing, much like Grim After Dark getting more and more compact as the months go along.
Much like my ego.
Well, let's not go that far there.
All right, fair.
But I think that's about all of the news and fun stuff I saw online this week. Danny, you have anything else to add in there? Anything else that caught the old eye?
No, not for me, John. It's been a pretty crazy week for me in my personal life. So I have not been on the internet nearly as much as normal.
Oh, just the naughty sites. Love it. So, Danny, why don't you take it away and let us know who we are talking to tonight.
All right. So you guys might recognize him from one of, as John mentioned, about 57 other podcasts that he's a part of. He's a member, or he hosts The Art of War. He is known for taking way too many Hereticus penitent engines in one list, like more than anybody really should. Master of the Repentia, and recent impressively 6-2 goer at the Orlando Open. We have Tim Pinney.
Hello. Good to be here, guys. John, Danny, how's it going? Last time I saw you, you had clothes on. Clothes off, I should say.
So good.
True.
It's going so well. And of course, now, because this is while you can catch the podcast the next day, this is a video stream, so we have to remain clothed for this part. It just seems like the polite thing to do for all of us to go in there fully clothed.
All right. Yeah, no, I mean, that's the viewer's loss, but I mean, when the cameras go off.
The party starts.
So do the songs.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the GW event was great. What do you guys want to know? The absolutely great.
Well, let's talk about the thing that's on everybody's mind, Tim. Let's talk about the terrain.
So it was good. It was if you were used to ITC 8th edition, where the first floor blocked line of sight, it would actually be very familiar to you because they had this beautifully well painted GW terrain, but they had all the windows and doors were boarded up pretty much, and then it was on these acrylic bases. So it was great because you could actually just put the objectives wherever. Like they didn't. The rule where terrain can't be on objectives, they just don't care. They're just like, just put it where it is. So some of the objectives were on the terrain, and if you were behind the acrylic plates, which were huge, they were like, I think they were 12 by 12 and 10 by 5 for the ruins, and then and then like 3 by 5 for like the dense terrain, and like the woods were out in the middle of nowhere, like they didn't really come into play. But the acrylic bases for the obscuring were humongous. So really, if your shooting wasn't like fast or infantry or both, you really couldn't shoot anything more than like 18 inches away. But it was great because the tables looked open, you could see all the armies, but then when you actually played it, you're like, wow, this is great, I'm not getting shot off the board turn one. And it was kind of very much felt like a real city fight every single game, which was really great.
That's awesome. And so AdMech didn't win this event?
They did. They did. Weirdly enough, it was a melee AdMech build. Yeah, well, they advance and charge, and they advance like a flat 6, and they charge like a 3d6 drop lowest, and they add like 20 onto their charge, and then they re-roll everything, because why not, But yeah, no, it was I actually paired into Richard round 3. He just kind of just sat there and just smiled at me. Like as I was walking up, and then for the first 2 turns, it was weird. He didn't say anything. He just like rolled dice and looked at me, and I'm like, Richard, what do you want me to roll here? Like, am I taking saves? What's happening? He's like, no, you just pick those models up. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess this is happening. So
I can just see him.
Yeah, it was weird. He would just roll dice and just tell me to pick up models. But I mean, besides that, it was a great game.
Just seeing there, like eating an apple the whole time. And you're like, what does this unit do? And then he just like keeps eating the apple and just shakes his head no. And then points to your unit, and you're like, okay, yeah.
I call that the move.
No, it was great. I actually faced AdMech 3 times this weekend, and Dark Angels once, Drakari once. It was pretty good, but the list I brought, I think, was pretty much like tailor made or I tried to tailor make it for the event. So it was just like all the Repentia and then all the advance and shoot multi-meltas that I could physically fit into a list, and that turned out to be pretty effective when the Repentia just Kool-Aid manned or Kool-Aid woman like right through a wall and just picked up everything. I think there was one round where I think I picked up like 10 Deathwing Knights in a single fight phase, and that felt pretty good.
Oh. And then didn't you like tri-point with some people too after that as well? Or?
Yeah, Celestine and Val killed the bikes too, so immediately zeroed them out for while we stand we fight. Obsec Repentia piled onto his Stubborn Defiance objective, and then Val and Celestine tri-pointed a Ravenwing Apothecary against the wall. They're like, "Happy International Women's Day," So that was a pretty big swing that turn.
Yeah, I bet. So let me just ask you real quick. You kind of already pointed out that the terrain was very specific, very obscuring, very light lines of fire, and kind of really poor visibility through a lot of the place. Like, what did you do differently than you would have done, say, a kind of like a regular event, or how did you construct your list with that knowledge in mind?
So usually most time playing primarily like kind of like a T3 melee army. I usually bring about uh, like at least like two, maybe like three transports. I actually only brought one. Part of that was because I didn't know until I actually showed up to the event if they were going to rule that Argent Shroud could disembark in advance and count as stationary. We're still winning FAQ. Fortunately, shout out to Justin Curtis, who is a member, who was acting as one of the members of the great judge team, which is kind of great because they actually pulled people from judging staff and teams from all over the country. I noticed a lot of locals, but a lot of people from the Nova crew, FLG crew, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
So he gave me a solid ruling on that. But that was great. I only brought one Rhino. I was like, well, I don't want to spend all these points on vehicles. I might get parking lotted. I might not need them as much. I want to take the gamble that not a lot of people are bringing in direct. They should, but they weren't. But if I'm building 2 or 3 Rhinos about being with the plan of being able to disembark and advance and shoot, and they rule I can't, like now it's kind of awkward. So I only brought one. And then I just brought all the repention in the world because they can advance and charge, charge 3d6, drop the lowest. I can do a little buff to give them like +1 to advance and charge. And basically, turn 1, they moved from behind the obscuring up into the ruins. So they were pretty much at that point, like maybe about 7 or 8 inches from like the center of the board, essentially, and they were projecting this threat of about like 20 to 25 inches. And then I would use them not only to project threat, but I'd kind of like make like a little U inside the ruins, and I'd kind of like just put my entire army in that. And it's kind of like, well, if you don't have indirect, and I'm screening out my backfield, and you can't get angles with your guns, you have to come in here, and I'm screening my army with Repentia that fight on death. So what are you gonna do about that?
Yeah, good luck
And then,
with that.
yeah, and then just with the being able to disembark and then move, advance, and then like shoot and kind of stationary with like master artist rerolls, or just it just having infantry that could just go through walls and then move, just advance and have that mobility was honestly huge. And a lot of times I would just kind of as people, if they had vehicles or whatever, they tried to like rotate their vehicles to get angles at me, I would just kind of like slide away and like leave that area. They could just, with these huge plexiglass plates, they could never actually like get line of sight on my stuff. And then I would just charge something into them. But it was great. The army was extremely destructive, but it really required good terrain to operate. And thankfully, I had that.
Yeah. Do you feel if you had that Argent Shroud ruling beforehand, without going to the event, that your list would have changed significantly?
I might have brought like a second Rhino, I think,
Sure.
just because getting that initial push out or whatever. The thing was they didn't have clocks. So once I kind of figured out like, hey, we're kind of playing on time, but like some of these events or some of these games, they would only finish like round 3 or round 4, especially because it seemed like there was not the normal like competitive crew there. It seemed like there's a lot of people that just kind of like weren't used to like events or stuff like that. And like you hate to do it, but like if it's pretty obvious that the game is not going to go to round 5, a lot of times I would just put my entire army into someone like round 3. Especially some of these people they kind of got a little wet and wild with their CP. I'm kind of like, oh, I noticed you only have like 1 CP over there. It would be a shame if this entire Bloody Rose army went into you right now. So I did that to one of my ADMEC players. He basically just had to sit there and take 3 full fight phases from a Bloody Rose army with like fight on death and just the works. That game went from 0 to 100 real quick.
Yeah, both probably in points and speed. Danny.
Yeah. Brutal. So again, I was going to ask you, kind of answered my question. Did you feel like the lack of clocks really was an influencer on some of the top table games, or was it kind of more of a mid-table decider?
I'd say it was like mid and low tables. There was I was usually too involved in my own games to really truly pay attention to what was top table. But even like in the finale, they ended up, I think, like clocking out because it was the finale. They made an exception. They're like, well, it's everyone's watching this. Yeah, there are some people complaining in chat. They're like, oh, well, they shouldn't be treated specially. It's like, well, yeah, they should. It's the finale. at the top table. So I'm pretty sure like everyone, the couple hundred people watching at home would like to actually see it finish.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 1,500 people I think would actually like to see it finish, not be like, oh, dice down, So there was a few tables where because there was a lot of Brohammer members and there were like a lot of competitive players in attendance where both players just kind of agreed, even though I don't think it was binding by the TO, but they would agree, be like, hey man, do you want to just use a clock, and they held each other to it. So which is a little bit of trust and courtesy, because like if one of them was like losing or whatever, I'm thankfully this didn't happen, but like one of them just could like thrown the clock across the event hall and be like, what clock?
I
Game
love
ends.
the image of your Brohammer team smuggling in chess clocks like children would smuggle drugs into school, and just putting them on the table. And then whenever like you would see someone in a Warhammer community shirt walk by, or a judge, you just grab it and throw it under your jacket again, and then argue about whose time that was on.
Yeah, you totally wouldn't look suspicious in Florida wearing a trench coat in the summertime, right? It would be fine. It would be fine.
It was actually because we just had a tropical storm pass by us. It was actually beautiful weather. It wasn't too hot.
Wow.
The humidity was relatively low. Yeah, so it takes a destructive act of nature to make the weather bearable down here.
Well, I guess
that's what it takes, if you were wondering.
We're happy that there was a destructive act of nature to facilitate that weather.
I mean, well, that's what it's like in Florida. If it's like a Cat 3 or less, like everyone's just kind of like, oh, the weather's gonna be good for 2 weeks afterwards. It's like that's all anyone says.
Real quick from the chat, someone's asking here, curious on the thought on overall competitive players versus an FLG event. And was there a big difference, or was it not really a thing? I think you mentioned before it was maybe like a little bit more casual from your experience.
Yeah, it seemed like a little more casual. I mean, it's hard to tell because it was a big event. After drops and everything, is like 196 players, maybe. I don't think I actually looked at the number until like maybe day 2 or day 3, so there may have been more drops. It might have been higher than 200. It was in Florida. It was about 3 hours from where I live, and Orlando is like the Orlando, Lakeland, Tampa area. Like that is like the heart of like where Brohammer is, So there was a lot of faces there I just didn't recognize from the Georgia, like Alabama, Florida region. So yeah, I think it brought out a lot of people to woodwork, and there was definitely some really nice painted armies. And I was like, well, no one I know paints like that. So yeah, I would say it's probably about 30, 35 people who I know like attend competitive events on the regular and everything like that. I would say out of that, I would say probably about like 15, including the Art of War guys, were like like really really serious contenders. But there was a lot of good people that I met that like they were playing, and I'm like, okay, this guy is he kind of knows like what he's doing a little bit, like you kind of like see it there, even though maybe he doesn't go to a lot of events or whatever. I think some of these guys just like play in their garages, and they kind of figure out like the right thing to do, even though they're not going to events and that kind of stuff. So I can kind of see that. I'm like, well, this guy's been getting like reps in his garage or something like that, even if he hasn't gone to a lot of tournaments. And that kind of rewards that, I've found. Just getting those repetitions in, just kind of making good decision calls and that kind of stuff.
Sure.
So yeah, but I'd say like maybe like 40 out of the 200 people were like people I would expect to see at an event somewhere else.
Yeah. So would you feel that was just sort of the draw from like it being an official GW event rather than something where it might be like more demonized as like, oh, this is a competitive event?
Yes and no. I think it's just that I don't think it was so much that like FLG or like competitive events or ITC is like demonized. I think just as soon as you Warhammer just has so much reach. I think I saw some stats somewhere like when the Marine Codex dropped or something like that, or it was like out of like 250 sales, I think like 15,000 of that went to people with like ITC records or something like that. So it's just the competitive community is just not big, and Warhammer and Games Workshop has a huge net. And so when they put out an event with all the power of their marketing behind it, you put that hammer logo on something, and people show up. Like people come out for that.
Mm-hmm. Man, that's awesome. It sounds like a great time. The terrain sounds super interesting. I'm really excited to see how that kind of permeates and changes the meta. Do you think that that's going to change the meta comparatively to like non GW events?
Maybe. I don't think going without clocks is. I don't think that's going to like take off. I think competitive events are going to definitely want to keep clocks, especially if it's primarily competitive players going. The terrain was great, and now doing all these shows and everything, people talking about the terrain, stuff like that. I think people are really going to like that, especially because a lot of stores have that type of terrain, and then all you got to do is just get some sort of base, whether it's acrylic or a normal base, and put it underneath it. And yeah, like this is the official GW event. They officially said like, hey, this is kind of what we envision Nine to be played on. So there's going to be those like RTTs and those small game stores that are not really like plugged into the pulse of the meta and the community, and it'll take months, if not years, for it to kind of like dribble down to them. But we already have WTC doing their heavy terrain. We have Frontline Gaming doing player place terrain. Now we have GW doing their terrain, which a lot of stores have and requires minimal setup to emulate. And people that are there loved it. And I think especially as we have the New Orleans and the Texas one, I think you're really going to see it start to take off. And I hope it does, because I really liked it. It also helps that we had that recent. I think there was that issue with like the submarining or whatever, and stuff like that. And it was like, couldn't have been better timing, because
I'm familiar.
Could not have been better timing, because this event was using, I think, just straight like win loss or like win path. And then it went to brackets, and I think they used like seeds or whatever. So if you look at the event in BCP, it looks like really weird, like with the pairings and stuff like that. But it kind of made sense. It was just like, if you just need clocks and like you're there, I think it would have been a great event.
I just want to throw this in here, Danny. It was one time, and it was unintentional submarining.
It was twice. And it was a totally different issue. But no, I'm really glad that they kind of have resolved this a little bit. It seems like with WinPath, I'm excited to see that get implemented in some other events. It seems like a way better system.
Yeah, for sure. I just don't think there should be a way to influence your standings in an event while you're inside the game, outside of just winning or losing it. Like, there should be no other hidden levers that you can pull, especially because a lot of times, one player will know about it and the other player won't. The guy will just be like, "Oh, why are you stepping off all?" Yeah, well, the guy would be like, "Why are you stepping off all objectives?" And the guy would just be like, "Oh, oops, I forgot." No, you didn't.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. They just want to move. It's happening.
God, I thought you said lovers, Tim, and I was going to ask you a bunch of questions.
Well, let's just let's
well, it is called
on the other screen.
Well, it is called After Dark. I do request that you keep your wonderful shirt on. I think my favorite thing, seeing the way the pairings were made, and the way like it was straight wins instead of like points being mashed up there, was seeing former guest of the show, friend of the show, Philip Hall, on top after day one, at 3-0 as it was on battle points. And like, I don't think stuff like that happens if you go, and again, not to disregard Phil, if you go to like a straight path to victory like we were doing before. So I really like this new way of pairing, because it highlights just a lot of really great players who might get lost in the shuffle outside of that.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah.
Now, just jumping in, we talked about the terrain at GW Orlando with the heavy obscuring, the boarded up windows. They're kind of making it look like any local high street right now on your battlefield. Frontline recently has entered the player optimized terrain. They're doing it with P.O.T, and that's the way that they're making their terrain going. What is your views on P.O.T? And do you think it's something that's going to solve a lot of the issues that we're seeing the FLG events?
Well, my views on P.O.T is that a lot of people don't like it. A lot of people have beliefs against it. But it's kind of showing up. It's becoming, I guess you could say, like the legal standard in a lot of places. Not in my state yet, but you are starting to see it nationwide. And it's just an eventuality before you can go down to your local 7-Eleven. You can just buy yourself a couple ounces of player optimized terrain. And when that happens, it's just going to be everywhere. So I'd say just, it's not going away. You just got to plan with the pot is here to stay. When I retire, when I go to events, it's going to be pot all over the place. So much pot. But yeah, no, it's good that it's kind of becoming like more like mainstream, because it's right now, if you aren't expecting it, an event has it. There's kind of like a little game within a game that maybe only one player knows how to play. So now it's becoming more mainstream. It can now be something that's kind of like talked about, and like that kind of knowledge on like how to make it so you don't just immediately lose turn one. Build your pillow fort. Like this. Just say, take your terrain, do this. And there's more to it than that, but as that disseminates throughout the community, I think more and more people are going to get on board the pot, and my mom's been getting into 40K. I think I almost got her sold in the pot too, so we're almost there. It's 2021. It's time for pot.
Oh man! So, and I really like this in a lot of ways because it kind of differentiates events. Now that all the events are pretty much using the same scenarios, it's kind of an interesting way to make like different events actually different. So I'm really excited to see how this shapes up. And if terrain and the way that you place terrain is the way that we differentiate events, I'm cool with that.
Yeah. I will say, like, my only concern here is obviously like the lower tier player of the three of us is it could be a way, if you're not aware of kind of what you need to do or how you need to place, that you can lose the game before you deploy an army.
So I feel like Frontline Gaming I feel like they mitigated this a little bit because one of the ways you used to be able to beat people with player-based terrain is if you like won the roll-off first, you get to place the first piece. You would place the most worthless piece of terrain that was available on their home objective. It would be like just some scattered terrain. Be like, hey, good luck. Like,
here's a crater.
You took priority targets. Like, sucks to suck, nerd. Like, but like in FLG, they like kind of like divided it right down the middle. And they're like, hey, you get your terrain, you get your terrain. So it's kind of like, like people will learn as it goes along. It's like there's a bottom floor to how badly you can screw up. Like if all you do is put like a piece of terrain in front of the two objectives on the side of your board, like you can like make a game out of it. There's none of those things where like, it's not like priority targets. You're moving the targets around. There's kind of a strategy, like where to push your opponent's strategy objective away or pull it towards you, pull it open or stuff like that. There's not this. There is some strategy to it, but the fact that like they can't place terrain like to offensively onto your side of the table, like there's a little bit of safeguards there.
And then just real quick there in the chat, where they come from, it's called player optimized obstacles. Danny, do you prefer poo or do you like pop?
I mean, it depends, I would say.
No, it's called player optimized obstacle placement.
Yeah. So yeah, poo. I like that. Solid. Well, hopefully it is. But I'm more of a pot man myself. If I had to choose between the two, I know which one I want on the table for sure. Anyway.
Oh my god. Totally fair. And just to kind of circle back on what you guys were talking about a little earlier before, we are started like seeing the rise of different formats coming now. Whereas before it was defined by like, hey, this place does book missions, like, and thank goodness no one runs the relic anymore. That was awful. And like this place does ITC missions, and now we're seeing the real difference makers are going to be the terrain. So is this event like a GW terrain? Is this event like a pot or poop terrain? Or there was even an event this last weekend where it had like a mixture of the three, where it had like, I think it was the Hellstorm event, or there was an event where like a quarter of the tables were GW terrain, a quarter of the tables were like player optimized terrain. What do you guys see kind of being the future of these formats going forward?
Honestly, I think right now there's a tournament organizer group, and although opinions are kind of shared there, I don't think anyone like truly wants to be told what to do. So I think you're very much going to see a lot of times where kind of like people post something there like, I'm doing this, like, what do you guys think? Also, I don't care, so I think we're going to see people kind of do honestly whatever they want to do at their event, and they're going to share pictures, low key try to say that I'm doing it correctly and everyone else is not.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just going to kind of be a thing. Eventually, people are going to subtly kind of, I think the best ideas are going to float to the top. Like the optimized obstacle placement will float to the top.
I was sort of throwing here.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I think what's going to happen is you're going to end up seeing a lot of it, and I think what's going to happen is people are going to develop these terms for it, and the ideas are going to kind of coalesce. And so, pot in one state might be different than pot in another state, and eventually, pot's going to be the same nationwide. And so, when you go to a pot event, the pot right there is going to be, the same pot you had back home.
And then I just want to point out here, Snoop DeVille on Twitch pointing out, ha, we don't really call it that. No, you do. That's been retroactively applied. And because of you, that's not what it's being called in where you are. Yeah.
We already called your local TO. It's now called that. And by the way, you're banned for a year.
For making it being called that.
And Kara Quinn, the rules for this, he mentioned that Adepticon did it in such a way that you could like really screw somebody over with terrain by like putting it in the corner or something like that. In this, like you don't have the opportunity really to mess with your
That's correct,
which is great.
Yeah.
What is your personal preference between the two? Would you like sort of events where we're seeing where we have the dense GW, where it's a lot more kind of combat focused and maybe shooting's a little less effective, or maybe something like the Poop, where it's a lot more random of what it can be and you have to take a more balanced army?
I'm more of a combat guy, so I definitely like the GW terrain. The issue, the FLG terrain, it looks great. The issue, this is very small kind of stuff, is a lot of it is square or rectangle shaped, and so you can kind of push it up so you can stage behind it, but because you're basically hiding behind functionally like a cereal box, not the big family size one here, like little snack ones like your parents gave you in the car.
One's for you.
It's just someone moves out a little bit left, a little bit right, and they immediately can see a pixel of a Battle Sister or a Dreadnought or something like that, and they're like, well, hope you don't want that model, it's gone. And now, not only that, but while you're trying to hide behind it, if you're trying to hide behind a 6-inch square piece of terrain, try not to get shot at the board. Well, now No Man's Land basically just became 6 inches deeper, so if you're playing an army that's trying to close the distance with objectives your opponent, you can't step foot in that terrain because oh, you have AP1, well, LOL, I auto win on 4s and I do 17 mortal wounds on every single 6, so take your cover and enjoy it, so you basically just have to start further back and then hope your opponent puts something into your threat range and you can just kind of springboard off that. And some people out there that are very good players and they're running gun lines, and they just don't give you that one. They don't leave that one unit hanging out that you can just kind of connect with and then springboard yourself into that army. So I do think even with player placed terrain, I think it's going to really benefit a more defensive shooting profile with maybe counter charge. We've been seeing some of these Eldar artillery with Deathwatcher Harlequins allied in, just as cheap points efficient counter charge, and I think it might set up more like that type of army.
Mm-hmm.
So over the weekend with the GW Open, what was your favorite game out of all of the ones you played, while I continue to ignore the fact that we've made the chat devolve into 4-year-olds?
Oh man, it's hard to say. All my games were really good. I don't remember everyone's name, but I played a nice older gentleman round 1. He had a beautifully painted Ultramarines army. I made him pick it up very quick and put it back in the display case, and the entire time I was just complimenting him how beautiful it was. But he was there with his son, so I thought that was super cool. Every time I hear that, I have a little 1.5-year-old, so every time I hear that, I get super jealous. I'm hoping that could be me in the future.
So wait, not only did you beat this guy really quickly, whenever you killed his model and he put it away, you're like, oh man, that looks really great. Put it in the case. And then not only did you hand this person their really quickly, you did it in front of their child.
Well, their someone I think was playing a different table, so he didn't have to see that.
Good.
But I think he was I think this was his first game in 9th edition. He was playing I think he was using old Chapter Master style rerolls. He didn't know Transhuman was, and I was just like, okay, well, just pause real quick. I was like, so this is 1 CP. You know, you can only get wounded on 4s. Like, if you memorize no other Marine strat from the new book, like, memorize this, please.
Yeah.
You know, this is the first game of the event. This will make your event run so much smoother.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I promise you it's a real strat.
You weren't feeding him the fake ones.
No, I wasn't feeding the fake ones. And I was like, but I got bad news for you. This unit of 8 Repentia right outside your ruin. Reroll hits and wins. And take 32 saves at AP4 damage too. And he was like, what? And yeah, the game just took a hard left turn after that. Game 2, man, I'm trying to. Game 2, I played against, I think it was a coaching client of John Lennon's and Richard Siegler. And
are you contractually obligated to lose those games or keep them closer than you would usually?
I am not. I'm not bound to do anything. I'm just totally free.
So poop all over that guy's arm.
Oh yeah. Awesome dude. He was playing AdMech and he just was playing like a list I did not want to see, but he started with 4 CP and I was like, man, I don't know, man. That's pretty risky. He's like, well, Siegler does it. I'm like, well, Siegler could start a list with like 1,000 points and 0 CP, and he would probably beat the brakes off me. So we'll see what happens. He goes first. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, man, if this guy pregame moves his dogs onto the terrain and sees my Repentia just all sitting there, just wide in the open, I'm so screwed, you know, because like the terrain just becomes transparent. And it was totally set up for like Dawn of War type deployment, but we were playing Hammer and Anvil. And I was like, well, this could be really bad. He didn't see it. He made like a really, really risky play turn 1, and he put a lot of CP into it. And it didn't work. And he spent all his CP turn 1, and now his entire army was like 12 inches away from me. Oh, so I knew he was not gonna be able to interrupt for like 2 rounds in a row. Yeah. And so that game pretty much like Celestine, Vol, and a bunch of Repentia were like in his deployment zone like by turn 3. Just going to town. Round 3, I played against Richard Siegler. That was a great game. Was trying to keep it close, held him to a 5 on primary a couple times, and then he just did Richard Siegler things and just bounced dogs on my objectives, kept my primary down. Was actually not a very bloody game. Was very like kind of tactical, kind of stare off. But the second time he bounced those stupid dogs off my objectives, I was like, yep, game's pretty much over right here. Because it went from like a 9-point lead to all of a sudden it went to like like a 20-point lead. And that was kind of that. Yeah, just like instantly. He let me kill a lot of his stuff though, so that was nice of him.
He's a generous god. Like insert that 300 meme right there.
Round 4, I played against one of our local guys. Now, not just local Brohammer, but like local from like down Fort Lauderdale, Miami guys, Justin Brenner. So I think we both like it was great because I was a little bit tired and hungover. So I'm glad that I traveled 300 miles to play someone from home, but it was on round 2 or it was on day 2. When it's on day 1, it kind of sucks. When it's day 2, it's like, whatever, So that was a fun game. He was playing Dark Eldar, and I deployed like just the dumbest deployment ever because he was running 2 of those bombers that do D6 mortals to your entire army. Yeah, so I had to deploy like in the most dumb way possible. And I went first. I'm like, okay, cool. Give me like 5. You might want to go grab some water while I unscrew my deployment now. But then I killed both bombers and like some random Drake's turn 1. And then we kind of just crashed in the center, but I had more stuff because, he had a couple hundred points of dead planes, and that was kind of that. Mm-hmm. Trying to think. Then I played Robert Hart from Brohammer. He was playing Dark Angels. Mm-hmm. I think I told you about that story before the show started. So, he was like, I'm going to take Wild Standing Fight. I'm going to take Stubborn Defiance. So I'm like, nope, that's not happening. And I threw my entire army at him.
Thank you for taking it. Goodbye.
Yeah. So I kind of poked and prodded, and I was like, yeah, I think I could take this. And my entire army just came on over there and said hi. And then I played AdMech again, round 6. And this is like fatigue really kind of was rearing its ugly head here. He had 2 bombers, just the AdMech bombers, and a bunch of Lucius Skitarii bricks. And I played against AdMech a bunch, with like Reggie Sanchez, and we have a couple of other local AdMech players down here. And like the bombers are annoying. Like they might kill like a unit, like they'll take their tax, but they're not crippling. And I just completely over-respected them, and I reserved too much stuff. I deployed too far back. And then I forgot to like pull a chair up to shoot and everything. And basically, I went first. I ended up with a situation where both planes should have been dead, but it was on 3 wounds. He pushed it deep into my deployment zone, and so when I brought in all the reserves that shouldn't have been reserves in the first place, they were back too far. I killed it. It blew up. It killed a bunch of more Repentia, the whole thing was just like a car crash after that. So I played for points, but sadly, like that one, like pretty much got away from me almost immediately. And then day two, I played against Salamander's player, and he.
Wait, Tim, that was all in one day.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Day three. It was a 3-day event.
Okay. So. I was like, oh God.
No one tells you GW is a 15-round tournament over 3 days.
Oh yeah, no, you couldn't see it off the stream, but they had like all like the Brohammer players like doing push-ups, like a guy in a GW event shirts like yelling at him with a bullhorn, like it was brutal. But no, so day 3, like very relaxed atmosphere for the most part, because at this point, you had the people playing that were in contention for the bracket, and then you kind of just had like everyone else. And I played against a guy from the Orlando area, wasn't familiar with, but he was playing Salamanders, and so I was like, he got to the table before I did, because we went out to some very nice adult establishments, and we stayed out till like 3 a.m. And so we get in, like, bring himself crawling back in, and I'm just kind of like, I'm trying to be like jovial and everything, and like, introduce myself and that kind of stuff. And he's like, oh yeah, it's my Salamanders, blah blah blah. And they're a beautiful army and everything. And he's like, yeah, like they got some tricks. You want me to tell about them? And I was like, yeah, sure, if you want to. And while I'm saying that, I'm pulling out my Salamander's dice bag, and I like pull out my like Forge Roll Salamander dice, and you see his face just drop. He's like, oh no. Turn 2, I think I killed all his assault terminators, all his aggressors, all his Blade Guard veterans, a chaplain, one of his named characters, and like 10 intercessors, and I like tagged his like Scorpius, and that was kind of that. Then I played Then I played against my last game of the weekend. Thankfully, it was a great way to end. I was a fellow Brohammer player, and just when you play like 8 games, to just play a familiar face, even if it's going to be a tough game, like honestly, it's like one of the best things. Yeah. Because you just don't want your last game to be like against someone that's like not cool, So I played against the Brohammer player who's running 2 full payload Manticores, Trajan, and 5 Custodes Dreads, 3 Telemons, and 2 Galatus. And I killed all of it by turn 4.
Oh.
So, okay. But that was a very, very, very tough game. He started with 3 CP, and so I just kind of shot multi-meltas until he spent them all, and then I didn't spend like any CP the rest of the game, so he couldn't like get him off me with Curves Aquila. And so like every time I thought I need to use a stratagem, I basically like stopped playing, and I would just sit there and like for about 5 minutes, and he'd be like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Let me think." And I would just spend like 5 minutes if I really, really, really needed that strat or not. And it turns out like it was a good thing, because I made Trajan take 20 saves on turn 3. Ooh. And if he had lived, he probably would have won the game. And he failed. He failed like 3 almost immediately, and then he slow rolled all of them, and he made all of them except for his very last one. Oh. And he didn't have a CP to reroll. He didn't have a CP to reroll.
What a jerk! Slow rolling dice. Yeah. How dare?
He asked me if he could do it. I said, yeah, you can go ahead. But then he started making them, and I was like, I don't like this anymore.
I think something we've learned is that hungover, sleepless Tim is when he's at his most dangerous at the tabletop. Mm-hmm. Probably with all of the luck of Mercedes, who was probably super nice to him the night before.
My opponent's like, why are you wearing glitter and lotion? Why you smell like cocoa butter?
Like, don't worry about it. Why are your guys gold? Something I want to touch on real quick, and then we're gonna wrap this up here a little bit. You mentioned at the start there was a couple of games you just sort of steamrolled through, and I generally ask this to the better players that come on the show there. What do you do to make that game an enjoyable experience for that opponent? Because we've all had, I at least have had times where you roll up, you just get absolutely crushed, and within like 30 minutes, you're like, the look has dropped, they have dead face, no one's having fun anymore. How do you turn that into a fun experience for them? Or are you just like, sucks to suck?
So So I think something that helps a lot was the new Sisters book. It doesn't have the Miracle Dice generation isn't as much, and I actually took the Leap of Faith secondary in all 8 games, and I maxed all 8 games.
Wow.
So I was just immediately spending like whatever Miracle Dice I had. I didn't have any tech to re-roll it or anything like that. It was just whatever I had. Like I spent it, and I think oddly enough, in the 8th edition book, it wasn't Sisters like raw destructive power that really got people complaining. It was the feeling that like just like they would just like Repentia would just come running up from 27 inches away and just murder everything you love and hold dear. And then the 36-inch multi-motas would kind of do that too.
Yeah.
So I got really close and personal, and like, I mean, I had to put like I was doing a lot of killing, but I had to put a lot of my army back into the tray every single game. Like people got to like really kill me. I think most games I would end up and it would be like 4 or 5 sacrosanct left, and then like Celestine and Val, and then like the maybe the Rhino would be like like just smoke coming out of it, like it's on like 2 wounds and it's like sitting in the corner like somewhere, like just kind of like sad, and then like my 2 like buff character, and that would be it. Like it would just be like maybe like some Crusaders like banging their shields or whatever, like I would have like nothing, I would have like 400 points on the table, so I think it's a very interactive army. It doesn't feel like, oh, this is happening and I never get to touch them or whatever like that. You definitely get to get your revenge on my army after I get my pound of flesh. It's just a lot of times I would just I wouldn't necessarily kill everything, although some games I certainly did. A lot of times if it was like a newer player, I would just pick. I'd be like, okay, well, what could accidentally win them this? Like maybe they don't know how to win, but like what could accidentally win them this? Like so the Salamanders, first thing I picked up was the aggressors. I was like, those got to get out of here. Like I can't have those idiots just running around. And then a lot of times they would, if they heavily went to like one area, I would just kind of like leave that area and stuff like that. But honestly, just like being a person at the table, like asking where they're from, like what they do, how long they've been playing, but like really meaning it, not just just saying it, and when they answer you don't listen, like that my first opponent, he was like, oh yeah, I've been playing since like Rogue Trader and everything. I was like, oh cool, I played in 2nd edition, everything like that. He's like, oh yeah, blah blah blah. And I was talking about like my 2nd edition Chaos Army. He was talking about like his Black Templars back then, everything. Like talking about his son. I was showing him pictures of my kid and everything, and I'm like, here's a picture of my kid. By the way, those Blake are dead. Take 20 mortals, but here's like my kid and everything. Like it was just like, so like that was the thing. Like it was just like little things that like that to remind him that like like the a lot of eye contact, a lot of like, hey, like we're stuck in here like 3 hours ago. Like this doesn't have to be, but this doesn't have to be like hell in a cell. like that. There isn't like a cage that comes down around us. Like we can enjoy it. So
I think some of my favorite times in Warhammer are when, I think Danny, I've done it to you. I know I do it to Taylor in every game we play. Whenever I roll saves, I will just make intense eye contact the entire time and not actually look at the dice. And it's one of my favorite things to do, and I know it's one of your least favorite things to do. Danny, what else you got for Tim?
No, man, Tim, you answered all of my questions so excellently, dude. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure, man.
Why don't you plug what you got to plug? Where can people find more of you?
Okay, so I am on Art of War 40K. Obviously, I do the podcast there. Pretty much every time there's a GT or major, myself and John Lennon, the Boy King, Boy Wonder, we'll pull them on and we'll interview them, talk about why their list works. It's really great when we get someone with just a stupid list on, and they're just like, they're just like, oh, I just, I've went behind in my house and I found some models in the trash and I made a bunch of like 4-up saves and then I just kind of won. It was so much better when Nick was on the show. He was super frustrated, but I do that a lot. Also, we have a episode or a show called Florida K. We're doing it in seasons, just so that way we can kind of take breaks and do events and everything. We're getting ready to wrap up season 2 here pretty soon. I think when we talk about this event, we talk about John's recent win. I lost track of how many super majors he's won. Also, I think we're going to talk about Florida Man 40K. Might have broken up there with my bad Florida internet. But we're getting ready to wrap up season 2. We're going to talk about the GW event. So you can find us there with myself, Dan Smith, Will Taylor, and of course John Lennon. And it's, even though that is a Warhammer podcast, it's really just kind of about like Florida events in general, and it's basically like a poor man's Biff pod. And occasionally I moonlight on Sister Act 40K. I think I've been on there like 3 or 4 times now. I don't know why they invite me back. I really don't, but they do. So, I'll totally abuse that. And now I can add you guys to my collection.
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
Grievous, my collection.
Yeah. Your Grievous, your Pokemon collection.
Mm-hmm.
I think actually it's the reverse, where Papa Val has added you to his collection of podcast hosts and content possibilities. But yeah, so thank you, everyone. I loved our talk of poop and pot and see-through acrylic bases. We didn't even get to talking about touching a life-size Primaris' ass. That's how packed the show was today. I'm sure we'll touch on it later, much like the rear at the next GW event. We will be back next week for a very special episode of Taylor. Taylor hates the book we're going to be talking about, so we're bringing in an expert to stand up for the book while Taylor tells us why he hates it, and I'm very excited for that. But for Grim After Dark, I've been John.
I've been Danny.
Yeah, and that's been Tim, and we'll see you next Tuesday.